Good morning, Paducah Chamber of Commerce members, school partners, and guests. I'm sorry that I couldn't be with you this morning in person. I'm Jason Glass, the Commissioner of Education and Chief Learner at the Kentucky Department of Education. And I'm delighted just to record a message and just a few thoughts around education in the Commonwealth, some challenges we're facing in the short term, and also looking ahead, some things that we can aspire and work toward. This is really an extraordinary period of time, and the pressures on schools are incredibly great right now. They're dealing with a triple threat of challenges, all of which, taken individually, would be a lot to manage, but the three of them taken together are tremendous. The first, of course, is how schools open and serve students under the threat of COVID. We have schools across the state that are operating in-person experiences and in NTI or remote experiences, and really all points in between. And with the rising numbers of cases that we've seen around the state, we see schools going back and forth as they have students and staff members that they have to quarantine. They have to move into NTI experiences and then come back into in-person experiences. Looking at the rising numbers of cases in the state, and as we move into the holidays, we're likely to see even more of that. We know that respiratory viruses increase as the weather turns cold, people move indoors. So we should expect the same challenges to pop up when it comes to managing COVID. And our schools will have to look at the number of cases in their communities. They'll have to look at their partnerships with the local public health department, and then make the best decisions that they can locally around what the right learning model is for the community. But I want to commend the schools in Paducah, and especially my childhood friend, Steve Carter, who's the superintendent in McCracken County. You really have a great person and a tremendous professional that's leading that school system. All of the schools in your region have done a great job working to manage the learning and keep learning going for kids, even though we're having to live and work under the threat of COVID. A second major challenge that schools are struggling with right now is the challenge of racism and equity. This, of course, has come up and become a bigger issue after the events of this summer with the murder of George Floyd, the killing of Breonna Taylor here in Kentucky, and then the civil unrest that continues to unfold around the country around issues of racism and inequities. When it comes to public education, we have a moral obligation to make sure that our schools are places where any child and any family can come and be served and reach their full potential. And we really all have an interest in every child in the Commonwealth, every child that's in McCracken County and in Paducah, growing up to be successful. And success is not a zero-sum game. When our kids grow up and can lead fulfilling lives, they can be productive citizens, they can have a high standard of living, that helps everybody. And so we have that moral obligation to serve every child. The work that we're doing right now, I've recently hired a chief equity officer and deputy superintendent. Dr. Thomas Woods Tucker is joining the Kentucky Department of Education with a special focus on anti-racism and equity efforts. And one of the first things that we'll be doing is a review of all of the practices around anti-racism and equity that we have in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, starting with that first seek to understand approach, to have a strong grasp of all of the practices that we have in place, and then think about what do we need to add. This is an emotional issue. It's an issue that can create divisions among people and really cause some very difficult conversations. So we need to be careful, but also brave in how we approach this. And I know it's also an issue that's been of concern in Paducah, in education, and it's one that you're struggling with right now as well. The final issue that schools are dealing with, and we're dealing with at the Kentucky Department of Education, and this results from the disruption to the economy that we're experiencing because of COVID, are budget shocks. We have been looking at an 8% reduction to education funding around the state. That information came from the State Budget Office Director Hicks early in September. The Department of Education has worked to meet that 8% reduction with a plan, but we're holding on it for right now. And the reason for that is that we have seen tax collections come in higher than expected, so that's good news. And there are still talks underway around some kind of federal support or stimulus that may stabilize budgets in the current year and possibly into the next year as well. So we don't want to move too quickly on making any budget reductions when we've got these potential sources of revenue or support still ahead. Any reduction plans that we have for the current year, we have exempted SEEK funding, and that's the funding system that whereby dollars flow to schools. We've exempted those from reduction, so you're not going to see losses in student revenue at your school districts in this current year. And we've exempted programs like preschool and support for area technology centers and career technical education, and funding for the Kentucky School for the Deaf and the School for the Blind. Really out of that desire not to have any funding reductions go directly to impacting students negatively. So we work to protect those areas. And we've considered in the other funding reductions that we're looking at, how can we protect jobs? We don't want any of our employees, either at the state agency or in districts across the state, to be out looking for work in this time unless we absolutely have to. So we are planning for the worst when it comes to those budget reductions. We're also hoping for the best, and we've seen some encouraging news just in tax collections, and we continue to hold out hope that Congress will be able to come together and find a solution for some federal stabilization funds that may help us in that regard as well. So those three major things are what schools all across the Commonwealth are contending with right now. Our schools really have done an extraordinary job managing COVID, confronting the issues of anti-racism and equity, and also planning for budget freezes or budget losses. And we're going to have to stay tough. We're going to have to stay in this space a little longer because we're not out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination yet. We may have several more months of contending with these issues ahead of us. Looking beyond the immediate challenges that we have right now, what I look forward to is a conversation around the future of education in Kentucky, an aspirational conversation. The State Board of Education has charged me with bringing together Kentuckians and having a conversation and trying to find consensus around what education could be, what school could be for our kids going forward. The world has changed a lot from the time that I was in school, probably from the time most of you were in school as well. And we've got to consider how education has to adapt and evolve and change to meet the changing world. The pressures of automation and global interconnection of the economy and instant access to information and computational processing power. These things are only getting faster, and they're changing the way people relate to each other. They're dramatically changing the economy, and they are accelerating. On that point of automation, any jobs that can be replaced by machines are going to be, and COVID has only accelerated that trend faster than what we thought would take place. Already in existence are stores where you can walk in, scan your phone, pull the items you need off, and walk out, and there is no person there that's checking you out. And the largest employment sector in the United States is retail. So what does that mean for that employment sector and all those jobs going forward? We're not quite to the point where we have driverless vehicles yet, but I can tell you that we bought a Subaru for my wife to drive, and it can steer itself to the middle of the road. It can park itself. It slows down when the car in front of it slows down. It speeds up when the car in front of it speeds up. It's pretty close to being able to drive itself. So we're not quite there yet, but in the course of our lifetimes, and certainly in our children's lifetimes, we may see that kind of technology come forward. So what happens to all of those jobs? So we're going to have to prepare our kids for a world where automation and anything that's sort of repetitive in nature is going to be replaced by machines. At the same time, that pressure of global interconnection where jobs move all around the globe. We've seen that here in the era of COVID. If you've tried to order computers or parts from other parts of the world that potentially are disrupted by COVID or the global supply chain, we've seen challenges with that. We've really become aware of how interconnected the global economy is and how quickly, honestly, this virus spread around the world. That it only took a few months for it to go from one place in China to a global pandemic. And that, again, is a testament to how interconnected the global economy is. And then that last pressure of instant access to information, instant access and ready access to incredible computational power, that's only accelerating as well. We went from a place where you could go on the internet and really find entire all written human knowledge and photographs and videos all right there and easy to search for. And now you can access those things on a handheld device. You can access a lot of it on a phone. You may be in rooms where you can ask Google or Siri or Alexa questions and they bring all that information to you. So it's becoming more accessible and not only just access to the information, analysis and use of the information. You can actually ask now with artificial intelligence and cloud computing, you can ask for inference, you can ask for analysis of information anywhere and instantaneously. And so those three pressures are only going to continue to increase and accelerate. And so because of that, we have to think hard about our schools and how our schools have to evolve and change and adapt, and what experiences are we providing for kids and how we prepare them to be happy, successful, productive citizens and workers and family members in that exciting and challenging new world. My grandfather on my mom's side was a Kentucky tobacco farmer in Metcalfe County. And in the course of his lifetime, he began his farming career as a teenager, literally plowing behind a mule. And by the end of his farming career, he was driving his Chevrolet pickup truck on an interstate highway system. So that's how fast the world can change in one lifetime. So when you look in the eyes of your 3-year-olds, your 2-year-olds, your kindergartners that are in McCracken County and in Paducah right now, think about what the world is going to be like by the time they enter the workforce or they retire or they start having their own grandchildren. It's hard to imagine, but we can imagine that it's going to be faster and more accelerated than it is right now. Once again, thank you so much for the time to be with you this morning. I apologize again that I couldn't be there in person. Appreciate this chance to talk with you, and also that I'm incredibly grateful for your ongoing support of public education. Steve Carter's told me that the Chamber has been an incredible partner with McCracken School District, as well as Paducah Independent, the private schools that are there in your community, and they are very grateful and appreciative that they have that support from the business community, and I do as well. Thanks everybody, and have a great day.